years now. And so, Bill, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited for our conversation today, Bill, because you running the business eLead Corp, and it's been a really big part of my strategy in working with Microsoft partners is that top of funnel. And it's an area where I think you have really opened my eyes to new ways and different ways to drive top of funnel. So I'd love to have you start by just introducing Bill Dillon to our audience and a little bit about what you do and your company, and we'll go from there.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. Yeah, Elite Corp basically started as a firm that was setting appointments for Microsoft partners. We were funded by Microsoft to help their partners uh, generate more first-time appointments. And initially, I met with the channel manager from Microsoft, and I said, how can I help you? What challenges do you have? And she says, well, I give my partners leads, and they tell me the leads suck. And I simply said, "What if we just set appointments for her?" And she kind of cocked her head and said, "Really? You can do that?" So that's where it happened. And prior to that, in my previous businesses, I had already established what we call an inside out program where we had inside people that were setting appointments for our outside people because I wanted my outside people, they were much more valuable to me uh, doing customer facing rather than sitting in there making cold calls and trying to identify opportunities. So I've been doing this for a long time, since the 1980s. Uh,
So you've
we
got a few
just
years under your belt, is what you're saying.
just a couple, just a couple. And so I had experience hiring inside and outside people, and I've done it for a number of different companies. I sold sales leads to technology companies for 6 years and spent most of that time training and educating technology sales reps about cold calling, pipelining, and appointment setting. And I had the opportunity to travel all over the place to different companies and promote that. I also spent about a year with a Microsoft employee doing the old MS 101s for anyone that remembers them, where they would
Yeah.
teach Microsoft partners how to sell Microsoft products. And he gave me 20 minutes to talk about appointment setting and pipelining, and it was a very productive and educational experience for me. So I got to be in front of hundreds of Microsoft partners within less than a year's time, probably close to 1,000. In some cases, we had up to 80 partners attend the events. So that's my experience. My piece of the puzzle, my little piece where I have a level of expertise is in the appointment setting, that SDR portion, building SDR practices, developing processes, repeatable processes, because in the SDR world, a lot of times you're dealing with people that are going to be there a short period of time. So it's important to be able to come in and put somebody else, let them take over a pipeline that's already been established by a predecessor. A lot of times they would be moving into account executive roles. So we needed to backfill that position to keep the pipeline and make sure we didn't miss any opportunities. So uh, I always told my clients when I had a call center with 40 SDRs setting appointments for Microsoft partners, Avaya partners, uh, Mitel and ShoreTel partners, and I always told them, it was our job to develop a relationship for our clients and set those appointments. So I was able to train them, build a process that we could replicate for different types of companies, and be able to set appointments on a consistent basis. Develop a process for setting appointments on a consistent basis.
I love that. I think one of the things that you kind of glossed over there, but I think is really important, is that your background includes working with, telecom providers, managed services providers, Microsoft partners. So, I think that that's really important. I think it's one of the differentiators you bring to the table when you help companies build out these SDR teams, is that you've got such a wide breadth of knowledge in terms of how to prospect into these different types of customers, the messaging. And so I'd love to dig in a little bit. And maybe we can start with the SDR or sales development rep. Just give me a bit of background on why you feel that's so important for companies to look at that as a what some people think is sort of an old school approach, but I tend to believe that old things are new again, and so I'd love to hear from you your thought process around SDR teams and why they're so critical.
Well, a couple of things. It's the elephant in the room is that the average sales rep will make two or three attempts before they give up on a lead. And let's take managed services, which I have a level of expertise in. For us, our starting metrics are 100 dials, 10 reaches, and to generate one appointment. So we recently had one of our SDRs that said to me, he said, I had to call this guy 18 times to get this appointment. And that's why it's so important. And the account executives typically don't have the amount of time to continue to nurture these opportunities. And as soon as something happens, they close a big deal, their prospecting goes on the back burner. And so consequently, their pipeline, they have that roller coaster effect where there's nothing in the pipeline. They're servicing accounts and nobody's prospecting. So not only does their prospecting suffer, but you're missing opportunities because there are certain companies that you need to engage during that period that you're not engaging. And by the time you get back to them, those opportunities are going to be gone. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. No, I think that that's so critical. And I love the stat around the fact that you know, account executives. And I'm thinking back to my days as a salesperson. I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. I probably only made 3, 4 dials, and then I was like, okay, well, didn't get them, or to your point, closed a big deal or working a big deal. The prospecting goes on the back burner for weeks at a time. So yeah, no, that's yeah,
Yeah.
it's close to home right there, Bill.
Yeah, 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 it does, and it doesn't make sense. You want them closing, you want them customer facing. Yes, they need to be doing some of their own prospecting, but the if you don't have a consistent effort into these companies, in our normal rotation for, say, an MSP, we're trying to reach out every 90 days to their potential prospects in a marketplace. And even in that 90-day window, we will get people that had, when we spoke to them 90 days ago, they said there's nothing going on, they're not evaluating. And 90 days later, they say, oh, something came up, we had to make a change. So even in that 90 days window, we miss opportunities, good opportunities. So if you can think of the same thing as an account executive, where if they get busy for 3 to 6 months and they're not making those calls, they're going to encounter a lot of, yeah, I should have called you. We had something came up, we had to make a change. So there are those types of activities. The consistency, I think, from an SDR perspective, the nurturing process is something that's really important. A lot of times we're nurturing these opportunities 6, 12 months before we
Right.
can get an appointment. But at the same time, we're already building a relationship with these companies. The SDRs have talked to them enough time that they're familiar with them. We've been branding the company along the way, opening them up to accept other information, maybe invitations to webinars, other things, and then continue to follow up on them on a regular basis. So that kind of nurturing is something that's really important. And sooner or later, somebody has to get on the phone and talk to these people, regardless of where the leads are coming from or what you know about the company. Um, and then the other thing that's absolutely critical from an SDR perspective is, let's talk about data. We talk about it all the time. Data's crap, and typically customers of mine will say, "Well, we'll just buy more data." I'm like, no, we don't necessarily need more data. We need to keep the data that we currently have fresh. Contact data in a normal environment degrades at 38.6% a year. Uh, Post pandemic, we really don't know, and especially in today's volatile marketplace, we don't know. But it's impossible to buy good contact information. Somebody told me recently 60% of the information they purchased was inaccurate or out of date. So maintaining those contacts by touching them on a regular basis and building a good contact database is makes everything that these SDRs doing makes everything else more effective. The marketing things, if you're sending the appropriate marketing material out to good contacts or the right contacts within these companies, that makes their efforts more effective as well.
I love that. And it's not just, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not just going after contacts that are in their database or your customer's database, but you're looking for the new contacts, for the maybe more appropriate contacts or sort of ancillary contacts that could help. So it's not just validating what's there, but building on top of. Is that true?
Exactly. And because when I go into a coaching session with someone, typically they'll be following up on leads that they may have gotten from vendors. And what I find in a lot of cases is they've been leaving voicemails and sending emails because that contact was the contact that the vendor gave them. And the first question I ask is, have you reached out to this company to find out if that in fact is the right contact? So they take it for granted that this information is accurate, and more than often than not, it's not accurate. And just because the email goes through doesn't mean the contact's still there. Just because their voicemail is still active doesn't mean the contact's still there. And a lot of times when we do finally get a hold of the contact, they'll say, "Oh, I don't handle that anymore." And they're not taking the time to forward you to the appropriate person. So going back in, if we haven't talked to a contact within a 6-month period, and making sure that they're still there, that they're still the right contact in that organization, is a big deal. It's a big part of it. Every single day, the SDRs I work with are acquiring new contacts, different contacts within accounts, and populating them in the database. The better the data, the better the results.
I love that. I think that's the better the data, the better the results. I mean, that sums everything up right there. I think.
Yeah.
What do you say to people that push back on the concept of an SDR team when, oh, people don't answer their phones anymore, or I don't want to be in the telephone sales business. How do you respond to something like that?
So I reached out to, or I had the opportunity to speak at a sales roundtable recently, and one of the attendees held up his cell phone to me and says, "You will never get a hold of me." Well, I beg to differ. I mean, we get a hold of people. My One of my favorite stories when I was selling sales leads, I caught a guy in the shower. Why he answered his phone in the shower, I can't tell you. And he yelled at me, "Do you know I'm in the shower?" I'm like, "Why are you picking up on the phone?" One of our SDRs recently reached a CEO of a company who said to him, "I'm in a meeting," but at the same time, she told him to call back at a different time. So by reaching out on a regular and consistent basis, you never know. You're going to get a hold of somebody. I once reached the CFO for um, a dialysis company. They had 18 dialysis offices that he was responsible for. And all I said is, "This is Bill from the XYZ company. Please give me a call." He called me back and we had a great conversation. We set an appointment, and he said, "You should really. Let people know why you're calling." And then he stopped in the middle of our conversation. He said, "You know what? I probably wouldn't have returned your call." And I didn't say anything dishonest. I didn't say, anything misleading whatsoever. So he said to me, "I guess your strategy works." So sometimes there's
Yeah,
there's an expression, there's margin in mystery. If people don't know what the call is about, sometimes it's better not doing anything unethical or anything dishonest, because I believe in being completely honest when you're making calls. You don't want to start a relationship on a lie. Yeah. So I encourage all my people to um, be ethical in terms of everything they're doing, but at the same time, be creative in terms of the approaches that you're using to get a hold of
yeah.
people.
I think that's so important. And to me, that really talks about the mindset that somebody is going into a call with. If I'm calling you because I believe I can help you, that's the mindset I've got to show up with every day as an SDR. I think that comes across in a phone call. I mean, if it's no different than saying, if you smile when you're calling somebody, that comes across the phone. I really believe the mindset comes across as well. Like I truly do want to help you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, exactly. And we have mirrors on the desks of the SDRs so that they can see what they look like when they're on the phone. And you can tell even by their physiology what kind of day or how they're presenting themselves on the phone. And that makes a big difference. And this is why when I build an SDR program, I do it in-house because doing this remotely is absolutely brutal. It's no fun. As a matter of fact, my nephew recently got a job with an MSP, and he's making outbound calls on their behalf, and they're not allowing him to go into the office, which it's just grueling. It's really really grueling. But when you're in an environment, somebody else is setting an appointment or has a good call, or you have a bad call, you have somebody to share that with and kind of bounce off of them, so it makes a big difference having that environment, that good environment, where people can have the opportunity to work with somebody else is a big part of the SDR program. So I think the folks that are having people work remotely are not getting all the results that they could get in a motivated environment where people are doing this together and sharing success and sharing difficulties that they're at the end of the day. We go over challenges and successes at the end of every day, so that they can share them with each other.
Yeah, I love that. I think that just it feeds into the energy of a team. It's really leveraging the power of a team, and
Yeah.
having the energy across all of the different players on your team. And as you said, when somebody's having a bad day or not getting through to anybody, they can feed off the energy of the rest of the team. So
Yeah, it's very important, and I think it's critical in terms of building a highly developed SDR team. I mean, some people just don't have that opportunity where they're working remote, but if they can, and I encourage them. I always like to at least start with two SDRs with anybody I'm working with, but if they just don't have the budget for something like that, I encourage them to put him in with their help desk people so that they're in an environment where there is other stuff going on during the course of
yeah.
the day, and that'll make a big difference in terms of their mindset and them keep staying motivated doing this.
No, I love that. I love that. So I'd love to pivot and talk about, what your expectations from a well-oiled SDR team. And you've kind of sprinkled a few stats around about the number of calls made in a day or the number of reaches. But I'd love to have you just kind of talk about what does an ideal SDR team look like, and how are they producing? What do you expect of a good SDR team? Just to kind of give us a feel for that, if you could.
Well, and that gets interesting. It's like any sales part of the sales process. It's all about success metrics, and they can vary widely. Uh, I've worked with Dynamics partners. I've worked with MSPs. I shared with you. I started the moving and storage business. We knew exactly what our success metrics were for those different uh, types of companies. In the moving business, it was 60 dials an hour. It was very unsophisticated, and they'd get an appointment an hour. With MSPs, we typically, as I said, start with uh, 100 dials, 10 reaches, one appointment. But even along the way with that, typically in those 10 reaches, they're identifying anywhere from 2 to 5 future opportunities that they're going to follow up on. So it's not just the appointments today as much as building that pipeline for the future, which is why the SDRs should really be considered an extension of their sales cycle. If I'm working with Dynamics partners, their average sale might be 6 figures. those those success metrics will be wildly different. It could be twice, 200 dials to reach 10 people to get, one appointment. It may take longer. The nurturing process will take longer. So depending upon the complexity and the average dollar value of the opportunity, it it's going to be significantly different. And that's why building those success metrics for that company is the first thing you need to do. And that's why you need um, not just the performance of one individual, but you need to have multiple individuals so that you're not building a process around the success or failure of one specific individual. you need to have comparatives in order to build something that you can sustain, uh, a process that will, keep the company moving. But it can be all over the place, and it can take a lot longer, or it could be shorter. I will give you an example. We worked with a company, that automated reference checking for HR departments. They're a startup company. We had no idea what it was going to take. We were setting up web demos every 2 hours. It was insane. It was absolutely crazy. And but who knew? Going into it, we didn't know. We're calling
Yeah.
up HR departments to say, hey, we can automate reference checking for you. You don't have to make calls to track these people down, and you'll be able to get the references in, a more objective kind of, setting. And it just blew up. But I had other situations where, it was much more difficult. I did some work early on with Microsoft's, BI, product, and a lot of people were interested, but they weren't interested in buying
Right.
making the investment. So yeah, that was challenging. But building those success metrics is what's important. And once you do that, then you can build a team, and then you can scale it to whatever results you want to get.
Yeah, and I love that. I think it's important to point out that it's not just the appointment that's the win on the SDR team. It's building that future pipeline too, because that you have clear line of sight to deals that maybe are 6 months, 12 months, even 2 or 3 years out. But if you build a healthy pipeline like that, I imagine it makes the appointment generation even easier. So it's harder at the beginning, but as you start to identify opportunities and you start to build a relationship, that the close ratio, the conversion ratio improves over time.
Oh, absolutely. Your success metrics will change as your pipeline develops, and every day you're adding new potential opportunities or future opportunities to that pipeline. So, so it will over time, even over a 90-day or a 6-month period, you'll see the results coming a little more, consistently and a little more quickly, because you're executing on opportunities that you identified 3, 6 months ago that are now in a position to accept an appointment. And
Well,
those
Bill,
opportunities, as you follow up, can go either way. Sometimes you'll have people that say, well, that project's been pushed. By the same token, by calling them every 90 days, we've encountered a lot of people where it accelerated, and it actually, came to fruition sooner than they thought it was going to.
yeah, I think that's so important to get into that rhythm too. You talked about that 90-day rhythm of just staying in front of the customer and not too long that they've completely forgotten who you are, but not so often that it's you know being intrusive. So yeah,
Right.
I think that's a big part of what I heard from you today was really creating that rhythm and that process for success. So Bill, I
Absolutely.
appreciate you sharing all of this information around SDRs and how valuable that can be in the Microsoft partner ecosystem. As we're wrapping up here today, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you? Is it on LinkedIn?
Yeah, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's Bill Dillon, and I'm at eLead Corp. That's ELEAD CORP, and, be happy to just message me or connect with me on LinkedIn. Be happy to chat with you anytime.
Again, Bill, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to our next discussion.
Thanks for having me, Rob. I really enjoyed it.